how do you make a decision about what to buy, where to buy that first one?
Yeah, so I think that where people go wrong is they say, well, I want to do something in property, I want to buy and flip something, or I want to do BRR, whatever that is, but they don't actually have the strategy of how they're going to do that thing. And people think flips and BRR is the strategy. Flips and BRR is like the big picture overview, but within that you need a specific way of doing it, because you can't just BRR a property. You can turn a 1-bed into a 2-bed. You can turn a house into 2 flats, but that's like a tangible outcome. But you can't do BRR. That doesn't mean anything.
Yes.
So the first step is always just like a business, right? Like if you have a product, then you have to think about, well, how is that going to add value, right? Like, for example, if you're selling like water, then how is that going to add value? Well, people are thirsty. If I sell them, like whatever.
Yeah.
So in a similar way, the strategy someone told me was, well, if you take a 1-bedroom and you move the kitchen into the living room and turn the kitchen into a 2nd bedroom,
yes,
that's now going to be worth a lot more than what it was worth as a 1-bedroom.
Yes.
And so now I had a strategy in terms of, okay, I'm only looking at 1-bedrooms, which I'm going to turn into 2-bedrooms. So when I would go into Rightmove, I had this criteria in mind, which is, well, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is what I need to do. I think where people go wrong is they go into Rightmove thinking, I need to do BRR. I just need to find a deal.
Yeah.
But then it's like, every single person who says to me, I can't find a deal, my question always is, well, what does a deal look like to you on a piece of paper? Yeah, describe a deal. And it's like, no one can ever describe a deal, because they think that is...
Because they're looking for something, but they don't know what they're looking for.
Correct.
So they don't recognize it when it appears.
Correct.
Actually know what they're looking for.
Yeah. But if you say, I'm going to turn a 1-bed into a 2-bed, you can have like a very clear criteria, which is, okay, the property has to be 40 plus square meters. It has to have a separate kitchen. Kitchen has to have a window. Kitchen has to be at least 7 square meters. So you have a checklist. So when you go on Rightmove and you look at a floor plan and you're like, well, this works or this doesn't work, then you move on to the next one. This one works, this one doesn't work. You move on to the next one. But without that criteria, I always use the analogy that having that criteria is like going to a supermarket with an ingredient list. Like, you're like, well, okay, I'm going to make pasta. I need pasta, tomato sauce, and this and that. And you're in and out. Whereas if you go to Tesco thinking, well, I just want to cook something, you could be there for hours, because it's like, well, do I get rice or do I get pasta? Do I get this thing? And so that's where people go wrong. So I knew I was going to turn 1-beds into 2-beds. Okay. And so I went in with that intention, and I was looking for like a good while, trying to find a property where I could do this, and the numbers worked. Finding a 1-bed to turn into a 2-bed is not the hard part. It's just, getting the numbers and everything else.
And for someone that's watching and listening to this, trying to understand why that works, it's because a lot of property in this country is primarily valued on location, number of bedrooms. So where it is and how many bedrooms. So what essentially you're doing is taking property that's 1 bedroom and reconfiguring that same space to turn it into 2 bedroom, and just by doing that, it lifts the value.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's the same concept if you think about it, as taking a property in bad condition and improving the condition, because the condition has now improved. It's worth more. In this case, people are willing to pay more money for 2 bedrooms than they are for 1 bedrooms, and so that adds value. And because that adds value, because that makes money, now it's just a case of finding that.
Yes.
And you don't have to do that. You could buy a 2-bedroom house, turn that into a 3-bedroom house. The same principle. But it just means that when you start looking for properties, you know exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But without that in place, it's too hard. It's too hard.
We've done 3-bed to 4-bed houses a number of times, and we look for a certain plan.
Yeah, well, exactly.
So you know what to look for, because you know it works there.
Correct.
And that's what you're then looking for to make that, to get that extra value. And then you'll really have 2 angles where you're making money. You're reconfiguring to create a 2nd bedroom, which creates an uplift, but then you're improving the property as well during that process. Your new kitchen, bathroom, redecorating. So that adds another layer of improvement and an increase in value.
Plus, there's another layer as well, which is a bit more niche, but because I was buying flats, they were all leasehold. So the last one I did was in West Hampstead in London. It had a lease. Just to explain that, it just means that, when you buy a flat, it's not like you technically own the flat, but you kind of don't, because you own it for 100 years or 125 years.
You own it for your lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't own the land underneath. So when a lease gets shorter and shorter, the value of the property is now less, because you are essentially owning it for less, a shorter period of time.
Theoretically, it has to be handed back at some point.
Correct. So it had a lease of 87 years. Now I extended that to 125 years.
Okay.
And so that also adds value because the increase in the value is significantly more than the cost to increase that lease.
Yeah.
So I made money 3 ways, like to your point, refurb, turning into a 2-bed, and by extending the lease.
Excellent.
And so that's kind of what I was doing.
Yes. And so is that a model that you've now continued, or you evolved from that, or is that like the core bread and butter?
I did that 5 times. So I did that in, the first one I bought for 237. 6 months later, it was valued at 320. So it went up by almost 50% just by moving a kitchen around.
Yes.
Then I bought one in London Bridge. I bought that for 330. It got valued at 450. I bought one in Vauxhall for 290, revalued at 390. Brixton 240, revalued at 320. And then West Hampstead was the best one I did. I bought that for 303, revalued at 450. So went up by 50% again by moving the kitchen and everything else. Then I wanted to move into something slightly bigger, and I think to the conversation earlier, which is rent to rent is a stepping stone into this, and I knew this was going to be a stepping stone into something slightly bigger. I bought a house which I turned into 2 flats. That was the next logical step for me. How do I do something which is slightly harder?
Yeah. So that's the evolution of the strategy to the next.
Step, because it's not a huge jump.
Yeah.
But because it's only 2 flats.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things that when you're starting out is, it's hard to convince yourself that I'm going to turn a house into multiple flats, because it just seems a bit hard, a bit daunting from that point of view. But I think when you can do something quite small, like turning a 1-bed into a 2-bed, just to actually, let me go back a step here. I did 5 of these 1-beds into 2-beds. I then bought a house and I turned that into 2 flats. I then bought a house, I turned that into 4 flats. Right now, I've got a planning application going for a house into 6 flats.
Yes.
Now, though a house into 6 flats is so much bigger than a 1-bed into a 2-bed, I think if someone does a simple strategy like a 1-bed into a 2-bed, you still get like 85 to 90% of the learning curve.
Yes.
Because the way the finance works, the way the conveyancing works, the way you get comparables, the way you do stress testing, the way you get builder quotes, it's all exactly the same.
The renovation, the conversion.
Everything is the same. Yeah. So 90% of it is exactly the same. So when you go from turning a 1-bed into a 2-bed, into a house into 2 flats, the only increment you need to know is how planning permission works. When you go from a house into 2 to a house into a 4, the only increment you need to know is how to do a side extension.
Yeah.
When you go from a house into 4 to a house into 6, that side extension becomes a slightly larger extension. But it's not that the house into a 6 is 6 times more complicated than a 1 into a 2. It's just slightly more complicated, but it seems so much harder.
At the beginning, it seems like such a distance away, because we don't understand how to do that. As you said, when you go through the smaller stepping stones, you gain most of the learning. So then you can move on to bigger projects. Is that how the portfolio has grown there from 0 to the size it is by following that method?
Yeah, for sure. So like I said, I did 5 of these 1-beds into 2-beds, which took the portfolio to I think around 1.9 or 2.1. I don't know what the exact number is. I'll have to add up the values. Then I did a house into 2 that was valued at £410,000, so that increased it slightly. And then I did a house into 4, which was valued at £990,000. So yeah, it was these small 1-beds into 2-beds, just moving kitchens around, and then slightly bigger and then slightly bigger.
Yes. So if you take it all the way back to the beginning, in terms of the things you're doing at the beginning, the amount of profit you make on each step starts to increase. So it's not that you're moving into a different strategy or a slightly bigger strategy, or you're doing more of them, but the level of profit increases as well, either because of that strategy or because of knowledge you apply to it. So just for clarity, for somebody maybe watching, listening, you haven't sold anything along the way. You've effectively added them into your portfolio. So the first one, they came from the savings of the business that you were running previously, the service accommodation, the profit creating from that. Then how do you then purchase the second one when your money's tied up in the first one?
So like I said,
so the explanation, the BRR.
Yeah, so like I said, because I'm not actually selling and I'm doing BRR, just to delve a bit further into that, and let's go into some numbers as well, which might make the example simpler.